Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to Conquer Prelims 2024, a free crash course to help you revise the important current affairs of the last 18 months. Starting from today, we shall take up the sessions on international relations. We have 4 classes scheduled for international relations, and I urge all of you to attend these classes live, because it gives you an opportunity to cover each session at the right time. It will ensure that you won't miss out on any class, and more importantly, it gives you an opportunity to attempt the questions live, because we will be launching a poll for every single question. At the end, I'll take some questions as well. So if you join the session live, you'll get an opportunity to interact with the teachers as well. So I hope the series is benefiting all of you. If you think so, please let us know in the comments. Don't forget to press the like button and please do subscribe to our channel. Now, before I start, let me tell you why current affairs is very, very important for international relations. If you have seen the previous question papers, especially of the last few years, we have consistently got 10 to 14 questions from international relations. And all the questions have been driven by current developments. So this makes international relations very dynamic. And in fact, many students have found it to be a little difficult when answering these questions. Even though the questions were pretty factual, pretty much expected, in most questions, students found it difficult to answer them because it was dynamic. They hadn't revised, they couldn't remember the exact points. That is where a crash course like this will help you. Just attend all these classes till 31st May, and we promise to provide you the best content, the most exam relevant content, to ensure that all the important current affairs of last 18 months is provided to you in an easy manner. That too through MCQ questions, so that you can practice as many questions as possible. Now, before we start, we have one important announcement. The next English online classroom program is starting from tomorrow, 7th May. We have India's leading IAS faculties teaching in this particular batch. And the best part is that there is a special offer being provided by Unacademy. As part of Unacademy Manzil event, where we felicitated our 2023 toppers, we are offering a massive price discount on our IAS courses. Usually the course is priced at around 75,000, but right now there is a drop, a one-time drop, up to 25,000 only. So if you wish to enroll for the program, please make use of the offer and contact the number that was provided in the screen. Now let's get started with the first question. I will read out the question, I'll give you a minute, and we will launch the poll so that you can provide your answer first. I want all of you watching the session to provide the answers, participate in the interaction. Then I will discuss the question, provide the right answer, and then we will explain the entire topic. Because in every single question, there are many sub-related topics which can be very important for the exam. So stay with me for the next 90 to 95 minutes. I promise to discuss at least around 20 to 25 topics through 15 MCQs. So let's start with question number 1. Consider the following statements. Voice of Global South Summit was conceptualized by the G20 group of countries as a platform for bringing the developing and underdeveloped countries together on issues of mutual interest. Second statement, India has hosted 2 summits of Voice of Global South. And the third statement says the concept of Global South dates back to the Cold War period. How many of the above statements are correct? We'll give you some time. The poll should be live any minute. So all of you please attempt this question, and then I'll provide you the correct answer. Let's see how many of you can get this right. Over the last 1 year, this particular topic made headlines repeatedly. Voice of Global South Summit is indeed a major initiative that we saw last year, and it's going to be a very important topic for our exams this time. So let's see how many of you can answer this. Most of the students are saying option B, 63%. Okay, let's evaluate the statements one by one. The first statement is incorrect because Voice of Global South Summit is not a G20 initiative. It wasn't started by the G20 group of countries. It was an Indian initiative. It was India which conceptualized Voice of Global South Summit, brought all these Global South countries together in the run-up to the G20 summit. So that is why statement 1 is actually incorrect. Statement 2 is absolutely correct. India has hosted 2 summits last year, in January 2023 and in November 2023. 2 versions or 2 editions of Voice of Global Summit was hosted by India. So statement number 2 is absolutely correct. Statement 3 is also correct. The concept of the Global South dates back to the Cold War period. So essentially we have 2 correct statements. The right answer would be option B. Only 2 given statements are correct. That is the correct answer. Now, what do you mean by the Global South? Many students have a wrong assumption that Global North, Global South refers to Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere. However, that is incorrect. Here, North and South doesn't refer to directions. In geopolitics, in international relations, Global North and Global South refers to the developmental divide between the developed nations and the developing, underdeveloped countries. So essentially, during the Cold War period itself, a clear divide was emerging between the developed nations, the industrialized economies, and the developing, underdeveloped states. So in 1980s, the then Chancellor of West Germany, Willy Brandt, he would basically draw a line that would divide the countries into two different hemispheres. This line would roughly pass near 30° north latitude, dividing US and Mexico, as you can see in the map over here. And it would move towards the Atlantic and Europe, and it would place Europe apart from Africa. This line would move further north to cover most of West Asia, Central Asia, South Asia as well, including several parts of East Asia, including China, Mongolia, etc. Then it would dive, this line, this imaginary line that was drawn by Brandt, it would dive south to place Japan, South Korea, Australia and New Zealand on the other side of the divide, while including the Southeast Asian countries and Oceania countries on the other side of the divide. So essentially, if you look at the 2 divisions present here in this map that I have given, you will see that the Latin American countries of South America, North America, Central America and the Caribbean, then all the African nations, almost all the Asian countries, they are all part of a separate bloc, often referred to as the Global South. They represent the underdeveloped, developing nations. They even have a shared history, a shared past. For example, colonialism is something that affected most of these countries. All these countries in South America, Africa and Asia, their economies were destroyed, their cultures were ravaged by European colonial powers. So colonialism and the need for independence, decolonization, is something that bound these countries together post 1948. Plus, the developmental issues affecting them, massive poverty, lack of education, lack of healthcare. These developmental issues bound them together, and they also had many issues with the developed North. If you look at the developed industrialized nations led by US, the European powers, especially West European powers, and even the communist bloc led by Soviet Union, all these countries emerged as industrialized economies which were placed in the global North. They saw better development, better progress, and they would try to enforce their worldview on the developing, underdeveloped countries. So this divide marked by the Brandt line essentially highlights the global North and global South, which is essentially a developmental divide. So also remember that during the Cold War period, we had 2 power blocks. A Western power bloc led by all the democracies, the industrialized democracies led by United States and the West European powers, which were caught in a rivalry with the Eastern Bloc countries, the communist socialist countries led by the Soviet Union. So the other countries which wouldn't side either with the Western Bloc or the Communist Bloc, they would come to be known as the third world countries. If US and other democracies and its allies, if they represented the first world, the so-called first world, and if the Soviet-led communist bloc represented the second world, the others who chose not to align with either of them, they would be classified as the third world nations, including India. Essentially, they refuse to accept the polarization of the world as a result of these geopolitical rivalries. Also, they had some common issues, common interests that bound them together, and it was only natural for these countries to align, to come together and establish the global South community. Now, this divide has reflected at many global platforms as well, in geopolitical developments as well. For example, if you look at United Nations, the Western countries, the 5 permanent members, they've largely dominated the UN while not giving equal representation, equal opportunities for other countries. If you look at the Bretton Woods institutions, be it the World Bank or the IMF, which define the international financial architecture, even these institutions have been dominated by the Western countries, by the developed industrialized economies. If you look at WTO, the Climate Change Convention, at every such platform, it's the developed industrialized North which has dominated to the disadvantage of the third world countries, the developing and underdeveloped nations. That is why countries like India have often provided leadership to other developing and underdeveloped nations. If you look at climate change negotiations, India and few other developing powers, emerging powers, they have played a leadership role. They've given leadership to the entire community from the South. If you read about how Kyoto Protocol was negotiated, how the principle of CBDR, common but differentiated responsibilities, was inculcated into climate change negotiations, you will realize how countries like India, Brazil, even China to an extent, stood together with other developing and underdeveloped nations and gave a voice to them at the global level. Because poor African countries, or let's say poor Asian powers and other South American countries, they wouldn't be represented at the global level. They couldn't raise their issues, their concerns in front of the global community. So that is where the developing nations from the South, led by India, provided leadership at these global platforms. So this has been a long-standing issue. Even if you look at global trade negotiations at WTO, let's say you look at intellectual property rights related issues, or issues related to subsidies in agriculture and other sectors, there has always been a divide between the developed global North and the developing and underdeveloped global South. So if you know this concept, you can easily answer this question, and if you are aware of the recent developments in this regard, you should be able to get this answer right. Now, there is another term which is connected to this, which you should be aware of. It's called South-South cooperation. You might often find this term in newspapers. So UPSC might ask you, which are the examples of South-South cooperation? Right? It might give you few options and you need to select the right answer. Essentially, when we say it's South-South cooperation, it is an instance of one developing nation assisting another developing country or underdeveloped country. Now, let's say, for example, India provides economic assistance to a country which is facing an economic crisis. Or let's say there is a natural disaster in one country and India provides disaster management assistance to that country. Those are examples of South-South cooperation, where 2 or more developing nations, underdeveloped countries come together to help each other, to support each other. Those are instances of South-South cooperation. Recently, during the COVID-19 pandemic, India led by example. India provided assistance to several countries. We provided medical supplies. We distributed free vaccines. All these were examples of South-South cooperation led by India. And we also have a group called the G77, where India is seen as a leading power. It includes more than 130 developing and underdeveloped countries. And they often work together at platforms like United Nations, so that all the South countries, they speak with the same voice. they can collectively raise their voice against the powerful developed North countries. So now, let's come to the last point, Voice of Global South Summit. Why did India organize this summit? In what context was it organized by India? And what were the outcomes? See, India last year was holding the presidency of the G20. I'm sure all of you would know this. India held a very successful G20 summit. So in the run-up to G20, India came up with this brilliant idea to bring all these countries together, these like-minded, developing, underdeveloped countries together, so that India could collectively voice their views and opinions in front of the G20 group. So before the summit could be held, last year in January, India held the first Voice of Global South Summit and brought several developing, underdeveloped nations together, and it tried to bring up their issues, their concerns, which could be brought up in front of the G20. The G20 is a collective of the top 20 economies who are expected to solve the global problems. So those countries which do not have a voice of their own to speak about their issues, to raise their concerns, they were given a platform by India where they could come together collectively, express their concerns and views, and India would ensure that these issues would be brought up at the G20 meetings that were taking place in India. This was in line with the spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which was the motto of G20 summit as well, and it's been a defining theme of Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy as well. Right? In ancient Indian scriptures, this is a often stated motto, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the concept of treating the whole world as one family, as one community. So India truly championed this vision by hosting the Voice of Global South Summit, where we gave an opportunity for even developing and underdeveloped countries to raise their issues and concerns so that it could be brought up in front of the global stage. So after the G20 was concluded, we held the second Voice of Global South Summit in November 2023. The idea was to brief these countries, to update them about the progress, the developments, to brief these Global South countries as to what action was taken by the G20 regarding their issues and concerns. India hosted the second Voice of Global South Summit last year. So now, you can clearly say that first statement was incorrect, the other two statements were correct. So correct answer is option B. Now before we move on to the next topic, the next question, please write down the important initiatives that were launched through the Voice of Global South Summit that was organized by India. I have given the 5 points over here. Please make a note of this. There can be a question based on these points as well. Under India's leadership, these initiatives were taken up. Arogya Maitri initiative, a wellness friendship initiative, through which India will provide essential medicines and drugs to several underdeveloped countries, particularly the African nations. Because India is considered as the pharmacy of the world. We produce one of the largest volume of generic drugs and vaccines. Many countries, especially in Africa, they depend on India's pharmaceutical industry. Their healthcare sector is dependent on India's pharma industry. So India has promised the delivery of essential medicines and vaccines to the Global South countries to help them to address the healthcare issues. Next, the Global South countries have set up a knowledge depository, a knowledge facility called Global South Center of Excellence, also called Dakshin, referring to the Global South. This would be like a think tank, a repository of knowledge. It would collate the best practices from all the developing, underdeveloped nations. It will share that knowledge with others, and it will help scale these initiatives so that every developing, underdeveloped country can benefit from the experience and from the expertise of each other. Then we are also establishing an R&D initiative in the field of science and technology, a Global South Science and Technology Initiative, again led by India. Then to project the soft power of India and also to promote cultural relations between India and Global South countries, we have launched a Global South Young Diplomats Forum, where the young diplomats, right, who are probationers, who are serving in the respective foreign ministries, they get an opportunity to interact, to learn about each other's countries, their history, their culture, to build a bond between them, so that tomorrow, if they are working together at platforms like UN, WTO, etc., right, they will share a certain connection with each other. They will share a bond which will help the global South countries to champion their voice, to bring up their issues in front of the global institutions. They've also set up a scholarship initiative. Again, it's led by India, sponsored by India, where students from few select poor countries, they can come and study in Indian colleges and universities through a scholarship that would be funded by India. So these are some important initiatives that were launched, and I urge you to please make a note of this point. So now, let's look at question number 2. Consider the following statements. The question is related to India-Egypt relations. Egypt was a focus country last year, and I do expect a question to be asked on India's ties with Egypt. So please go through the statements first. Read the statements carefully. The question, the poll for the question will also go live, and I want all of you to give the right answer. Let's see how many of you can attempt this particular question. You can take a minute, read the question carefully, and then I'll provide the right answer, and then we will discuss the explanation as well. The first statement says, Egyptian president was invited by India as the chief guest for the Republic Day celebrations in 2023. As India held the G20 presidency in 2023, it had invited Egypt as a guest country for the G20 summit held last year. India and Egypt have agreed to elevate their bilateral ties to strategic partnership level in 2023. How many of the statements are correct? All right. 56% of the students have given the right answer. Very good. Option C is indeed the correct answer. All three given statements are correct. Statement 1, 2, and 3. All the three statements are correct. So let's talk about India-Egypt relations. Let's evaluate these statements that were given in the question, and also explore other aspects of India-Egypt relations which can be important for our prelims. See, this topic is going to be very important. As I told you, Egypt has been a focus country for India in 2023. Why? Because India invited Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi as the chief guest for India's Republic Day celebrations. Now, some of you might think, why is this such a big deal? It is indeed a big deal as far as India's foreign policy is concerned, because every year we have this practice where we invite a foreign dignitary, a foreign head of state or head of government is invited to be the chief guest of India's Republic Day celebrations. Now, this is not just any ordinary invite. It's a very symbolic move by India. It's a symbolic gesture. See, in the world of diplomacy, symbolism holds a lot of value. The messages that you send out through such non-verbal gesturing holds a lot of relevance in the world of international relations. Other countries closely watch for those non-verbal cues and signals that you send, which basically shows your priorities. So when India invites a foreign leader as a chief guest for the Republic Day celebrations, it essentially means that India is telling that country that we are going to prioritize our relations for the next 1 year. If Egyptian leader was invited last year, it was essentially a message from India to Egypt, to other countries as well, that in our foreign policy, in India's foreign policy, Egypt will receive priority as far as this year is concerned. That is why there were many big developments in India's ties with Egypt. Is that clear? Now, can you tell me who was the chief guest during 2024 Republic Day parade? Can you tell me in the comments? Whom did we invite this year in 2024? Any idea? France, very good. Rahul and few others, Praneeth Reddy, Anuj Priya, they've all given the right answer. Very good. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, was invited as the chief guest for this year's Republic Day parade celebrations. It essentially highlights the close ties between India and France, the priority that India is going to give for France in our foreign policy in this year. So coming back to the topic, last year Egyptian president was invited, right, and a lot of positive developments took place in India's ties with Egypt. So let's examine briefly right? The entire spectrum of India-Egypt relations and some important aspects of the relationship, which is very relevant for India. See, right from India's independence, India has built very close relations with Egypt. Right from the days of Pandit Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, and the then Egyptian leader, Gamal Abdel Nasser. Both were very good friends. They shared a good camaraderie with each other. They even held the same world view during the Cold War period. Just like Pandit Nehru, Egyptian president also believed that we should not further polarize the world by siding with the American power bloc and the Soviet power bloc. Both the leaders championed the non-aligned movement. They championed a third neutral path. And they brought many like-minded countries together to provide a peaceful alternative back in 1950s when the world was getting divided between these geopolitical rivalries. So it was India's Prime Minister Nehru along with then Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser, along with the leaders of Indonesia, Yugoslavia, the former country of Yugoslavia, and Ghana. These 5 countries laid the foundation of the non-aligned movement. So Egypt was very closely aligned with India. In fact, we share historical relations as well since ancient times. We have civilizational links with each other. So in modern times, under Prime Minister Nehru, the foundation for the relationship was built. And over the years, Egypt has been a reliable partner for India, not just in Africa, but also in the West Asia region. That is the most important point I was trying to make. See, if you look at where Egypt is located, right, obviously it's an African country located in North Africa. But if you observe closely, Egypt actually links Africa with West Asia. Right, this is where Egypt is located. Let me highlight this in the map. This is where Egypt is located. It borders the Mediterranean Sea to the north, the vital Red Sea to its east, and it's bound by Libya and Sudan. Both Libya and Sudan, they are going through a civil war in the last few years. So essentially, it's a destabilized region, a highly destabilized region. And recently, in Gaza, over here, where Egypt shares boundaries with Israel in the Sinai Desert, in the Sinai Peninsula, a conflict has broken out. So basically, on all the sides, Egypt is facing multiple challenges and problems. A long-standing civil war, including the presence of terrorist groups in Libya, a recently broken out civil war and complete instability and chaos in Sudan, plus a full-fledged war between Hamas and Israel in Gaza. As you know, Palestinian refugees are trying to cross over into Egypt, over here, where you have the Rafah border crossing, which is the only viable border crossing to reach some aid for the Palestinians who are suffering from Israel's onslaught. So Egypt becomes very crucial as far as African and West Asian geopolitics are concerned. And for India, it's a very reliable partner, very critical partner, because India sees Egypt as one of the few moderate countries in the region. If you look at North Africa and West Asia region, right, you mostly have authoritarian dictatorships, or there are civil wars going on, terrorist groups have taken control, extremism is raging across the region. But Egypt stands out as one of the few moderate countries which can act as a stabilizing force. Be it the Palestinian issue or be it access between Mediterranean and Red Sea. Egypt plays a crucial role because of the Suez Canal, the strategic Suez Canal. You can see here along the Sinai Desert, the Sinai Peninsula, right? This man-made canal that was built that connected Mediterranean with the Red Sea provided a shorter and a more viable shipping route that would connect Europe with Asia. Until then, ships which would carry cargo from Europe to Asia and vice versa, they would circumnavigate across Africa. They would move around Africa. Essentially, this was the route, the traditional shipping route between Europe and Indian Ocean. They would move around the Cape of Good Hope near South Africa, take a turn and reach Indian Ocean. This was a longer shipping route. It would take more time. The route was more expensive. It was never the most efficient shipping route. But with the construction of Suez Canal here in Egypt, in the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt, a shorter link was created between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. Since then, India in particular has been heavily dependent on the Red Sea route that passes through the Mediterranean. A large volume of India's exports to Europe passes through this sea route. And Egypt is the one that controls the Suez Canal, which is a narrow choke point. Some of you might remember a few months ago, a couple of years ago, there was a ship which got stuck in the Suez Canal and disrupted the shipping traffic for several days. It had a huge global economic impact. Exports and imports bound from India or bound to India, both were affected because of the disruption in the Suez Canal. Recently, after the Gaza war broke out, the Houthi rebels of Yemen have started targeting commercial ships in the same route, in the Red Sea route. And it has taken a hit on global shipping. Ships are being routed around Africa, which has increased the shipping time and the cost. And you can already see the impact on the global economy as well. So this is one reason why India's ties with Egypt becomes very, very critical. Because Egypt occupies a strategic location as far as India is concerned. Be it the Palestinian issue, be it stability in North Africa, access to Suez Canal, and the entire extremism and instability present in the region, Egypt acts as a moderating force. So India and Egypt have built this close relationship over a period of time. It's been a relationship that has been consistently maintained. And now India has taken this relationship forward by elevating the relationship to the level of a strategic partnership. So we not only invited Egyptian president as the chief guest for the Republic Day parade, but India-Egypt also signed a strategic partnership agreement, meaning we diversified the relationship. We are today focusing on many other aspects of the relationship, be it close economic relations. For example, Egypt was facing a critical shortage of wheat supplies after the Russia-Ukraine war broke out. Because in Egypt, wheat is a staple and Russia-Ukraine were major suppliers. So there was a critical shortage that Egypt experienced and it asked India for help, and India was the one which bailed out Egypt. India supplied wheat, even though we had banned the export at that time. We made an exception for Egypt and supplies of wheat was sent for Egypt from India. That again shows how India has prioritized Egypt and its concerns. Be it in the defense domain, Egypt is looking at India as a key defense partner. Egypt is looking at procuring the LCA Tejas fighter jet, which has been designed and developed by India, the Tarkash air defense missiles, and other radars and other military equipment. This could be an opportunity for India to increase our defense exports and explore other foreign markets where we can export our military hardware. And Egypt can become a reliable supplier of essential resources, right? It can give us reliable access to Suez Canal, and other resources that Egypt has can be supplied to India at a reliable and a very viable cost. So this is a relationship that is improving day by day, and last year we did give special priority for Egypt. So during the G20 summit that India hosted, we invited 9 guest countries. You can take a look here. 9 guest countries were invited by India, like for example Bangladesh and Mauritius from our immediate neighborhood and extended neighborhood. We also invited other key powers like Oman, UAE from West Asia, which are very close partners for India, Netherlands and Spain from Europe, Nigeria from Africa, and Singapore from Southeast Asia. So apart from these 8 countries, the other guest country invited by India was Egypt. So Egypt took part in the G20 summit hosted by India as a guest country on India's invitation. So that's why I told you all the 3 statements are correct. So based on these aspects of India-Egypt relations, maybe based on Suez Canal, based on the defense relations that are developing, right? We even have a military exercise with Egypt. So please read a little more about this. I've covered all the relevant points, right? Just if you're interested, just go through the topic in slight detail, and this should be more than sufficient to answer any question on India-Egypt relations. Now let's look at question number 3. The third question is referring to a region called the Abyei region, seen frequently in news. The question is asking, it's disputed between which 2 countries? Is it disputed between Ethiopia and Eritrea, or Kenya and Uganda, Sudan and South Sudan, or Libya and Algeria? You take a few seconds, the poll will be live very soon, and try and give me the right answer. Let's see how many of you have heard about the Abyei region. UPSC tends to ask such map-based questions. For example, if you look at the 2023 prelims question paper, I'm sharing a PYQ here. Just look at this question. This question was related to an African country which is going through a conflict and the resources that are found in this country. The question was related to the largest cobalt reserves in the world, which is found in DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. The reason why UPSC picked this question on DRC is because DRC was frequently in news. It's going through a civil war. It is blessed with immense resources. India and many other countries are looking to procure cobalt from DRC. So there were many similar questions last year, in fact. Look at this question. This question related to an African country which is going through severe famine, hunger, poverty, and civil war. Right? The question was related to Somalia. We had a match the following type of question, again based on places that were in conflict, places that were in news because of conflicts that are going on, like Nagorno-Karabakh, North Kivu and Ituri, again from the DRC, Kherson and Zaporozhye from Ukraine. Right? A match the following type of question was given. If you have to answer these type of questions, right, you not only need good map reading skills and geography skills, you should need good IR skills as well. Because all these questions are directly inspired by developments in international relations. If you are covering your current affairs, if you're aware of all these big developments in geopolitics, you will be able to predict, anticipate some of these questions as well. Now let's see how many of you have given the right answer. Around 64% have given the right answer. Very good. This region is disputed between Sudan and South Sudan. Very good. So let's look at the map and let's discuss the topic as well. Here you can see the Abyei region, which is disputed between Sudan and South Sudan. This is where it is located. See, the details of the topic itself is not very important. UPSC will not ask you questions on why there is a conflict going on in Abyei region, right? But just knowing that it's a conflicted region, a disputed region between these two countries should be more than sufficient for the exam, right? But just for the sake of context, in 2011, South Sudan was born as a new country. It broke apart from Sudan following a referendum that was held over here. Because this country here, both Sudan and South Sudan, they are deeply ethnic tribal societies which are divided on ethnic and tribal lines. So there are deep-rooted enmities and rivalries between different ethnic groups and tribal groups. And eventually, the tribes of South Sudan, they broke away through a referendum and formed a separate independent sovereign nation called South Sudan. But one region, the Abyei region, became disputed because Sudan refused to give up this territory as it is oil rich. This is where the Dhifra oil field is located. Please write down this point. There can be a question on this. The Dhifra oil field, which is in news, is located in which region or which country? It's in the disputed region of Abyei region. So Sudan realized that it's an oil rich region and it can't give away this region to South Sudan. South Sudan has been claiming the region based on its demographic strength it has in the Abyei region. So this has led to a long-standing conflict and there are UN peacekeeping forces deployed over here. Is that clear? There is a UN peacekeeping mission in 2011 to maintain peace between Sudan and South Sudan and to ensure that the conflict doesn't escalate. A UN interim security force for Abyei region was established through UNSC Resolution 1990. Now, why are we discussing this topic? Why was it in news? Let me tell you why. Last year, India deployed an entire women contingent of peacekeepers as part of this UN peacekeeping mission. That is why the region is important. It is related, connected to India. An entire platoon of women peacekeepers from India's paramilitary forces and police forces were deployed over here as part of the ongoing UN peacekeeping mission. Now, this is where we get an opportunity to talk about a very important topic, that is India and UN peacekeeping operations. There can be questions based on this because recently there have been many developments related to UN peacekeeping forces and the issues that India has with UN peacekeeping missions. Now, if you look at the graph that I have shared over here, it clearly shows that India is the second biggest contributor of troops to this UN peacekeeping mission in the Abyei region. If you look at the UN peacekeeping forces deployed here between Sudan and South Sudan to stabilize the Abyei region, India happens to be the second biggest contributor. This is true in most of the UN peacekeeping missions. Since 1948 till now, there have been at least more than 150 UN peacekeeping missions. And India has taken part in a number of them. As of now, I think there are 15 active UN peacekeeping missions, and Indian troops are part of at least 10 or 12. So India has always been one of the major troop contributing countries. In the last 75 years, India has played a very big role in promoting international peace and security to fulfill its mandate, its commitment as part of the UN Charter. And we have contributed to UN peacekeeping missions consistently. Indian Armed Forces led by Indian Army, our paramilitary forces led by BSF, CRPF, Assam Rifles, and even our state police forces. They have regularly contributed personnel and troops who have served in various UN peacekeeping missions, and they have even made the supreme sacrifice. If you look at the total number of troops India has contributed, it's more than 275,000 troops over the last 75 years. And India has suffered the highest casualty rate. More than 170 Indian soldiers and police personnel have been martyred in UN peacekeeping missions. The number stands at 179. Recently, a few months ago in Democratic Republic of Congo, in DRC, 2 BSF Jawans were killed by the hostile groups in DRC. So at great risk, India is sending its soldiers and police personnel to assist other countries to maintain peace and stability, which is one of the key principles outlined under the UN Charter. This is India's contribution to the world, contribution to the United Nations, contribution towards peace and stability in the world. That shows how India has been a responsible power over the years. This is one of the arguments that we use when we claim the UN permanent seat for India. When India is pushing for UN reforms and when we seek a permanent seat at UN Security Council, India points out the contribution that we have made to the global community, to the United Nations itself. We have been one of the largest troop contributing countries, along with others like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Philippines, Kenya, and others. India has consistently been one of the largest troop contributing countries. But do you know what the irony is? The irony is, even though India has contributed so many troops, it is our soldiers' lives which is being put at risk. We don't get to have a say in how the peacekeeping forces are deployed or where the peacekeeping missions are set up. This is entirely decided by the UN Security Council, by the P5 members, the 5 permanent members. They decide about UN peacekeeping operations and UN peacekeeping forces, their safety, their well-being, their deployment, and whether a resolution should be passed to set up a peacekeeping mission. Everything is unilaterally decided by the 5 permanent members, the P5 countries which have the veto. Even though India is one of the largest troop contributors, it is our soldiers' lives which is being put at risk. We don't get to have a say in their safety, their well-being, and in their deployment. This is a complaint that India regularly brings up whenever we push for UN reforms. We point out that it's developing countries, underdeveloped countries which are contributing troops. They are the ones losing their soldiers for these missions, and yet they are not given adequate representation at the United Nations, at the UN Security Council especially. So that is why the topic becomes very important. Since 2007, we have been deploying women peacekeepers as well. India became the first country in 2007 to deploy an entire contingent of women soldiers as part of a peacekeeping mission. Since then, we have sent women personnel into various conflict zones, from Liberia to Haiti to many other African countries which have been going through civil wars. Essentially, a UN peacekeeping mission is designed either to maintain ceasefire. Let's say there is a conflict going on between two sides and a ceasefire has been called. The primary role of a peacekeeping mission would be to maintain the ceasefire or just to maintain the peace. It's essentially a non-combat role. They are not sent to use force. They are supposed to use force only in self-defense, only when they are attacked by the hostile elements. But otherwise, they are meant to play a peacekeeping role, maintain the ceasefire, try and provide for negotiations, try to settle the dispute if possible, create channels of communication between the two fighting sides. So the mandate depends from country to country, from one peacekeeping mission to another. But generally, this is the mandate of a peacekeeping force: to maintain ceasefire, to maintain the peace, to not use force only for self-defense, and create opportunities for peace, negotiations and talks between the rival factions. That is the mandate or role of a UN peacekeeping mission. Now, these UN peacekeeping forces, they're also called the blue helmets, because they wear the blue helmets, right? All the insignia they carry, the logos they bear on their uniform, their vehicles, even their weapons, right? It's all the UN logo, which is a blue-colored logo. They wear a blue-colored helmet with the UN logo as well. So that's why they're also called blue helmets. UPSC might ask you, the term blue helmets is seen frequently in news in the context of, and 4 options might be given. So please remember, UN peacekeeping forces are also called as blue helmets. Now, the last point. 3 years ago, India made a big contribution to UN peacekeeping forces. See, this is a topic which has remained relevant in the last few years, and UPSC has not yet asked a question. UPSC may not stick to the last 12 or 18 months. It might go beyond that and pick up a topic from maybe 3-4 years as well. So I feel that this is an important topic. Please make a note of this. India donated a security tool to UN peacekeeping forces called UniteAware. It was developed by India in association with a few software companies and other institutions and United Nations as well. It's basically a tech platform which pools all the surveillance data in a peacekeeping region, right, or in a conflict-hit region. And it provides all the security inputs and threat assessments to the peacekeeping forces. Let's say CCTV visuals, satellite imagery, reports of attacks that have happened in a conflict zone. All this data is fed into this software, into this tech platform built by India, right? And it provides situational awareness to the peacekeepers. Wherever they are deployed in a conflict zone, by using this software tool, this platform called UniteAware, the peacekeepers can get to know the threats, the threat perception, what possible threats exist to their safety, to their well-being. So this is a gift by India to UN peacekeeping forces that was provided in 2021. So UPSC might ask a question here as well. What is UniteAware? Seen frequently in news. So this completes the third topic and the related subtopics as well. Now let's take up the next question. Question number 4. Please read the question. Consider the following statements. Recently, India took over the leadership of the Asian Pacific Postal Union. It's an intergovernmental organization of 32 member countries of the Asia Pacific region. It's headquartered in Bangkok. Please be careful. The question is asking how many of the above statements are incorrect. See, here I have highlighted and marked the term incorrect, but UPSC may not do that. UPSC usually gives it in bold, but it may not be very evident when you're sitting in the examination hall. So this is where you be more cautious. This is where you should be more cautious. You should expect such questions where UPSC might be asking you to identify what's not correct, what is incorrect. Many students have made a mistake in such questions. That's why I'm trying to include such questions as well in between, so that you're fully prepared and you're not surprised in the examination hall. So please go ahead. The poll is live. Let's see how many of you can answer this. Which statement is correct, which is incorrect? Based on that, give me the right answer. Some are saying option A, some are saying D. All right, let's discuss the statements. First statement is definitely correct. That is the context. Last year, India took over the leadership of this important Postal Union, the Asia Pacific or Asian Pacific Postal Union. It's an intergovernmental organization. There are 32 member countries representing Asia Pacific region. It is headquartered in Bangkok, Thailand. So all three statements are correct. So there's no incorrect statement. So what's the right answer? Option D, none of the above. None of the statements are incorrect. It's a very factual question. I know that. It's a simple topic as well, but it was in news and it could be important because India has taken over the leadership of this important regional organization. So let's understand a little more about the Asian Pacific Postal Union. See, last year, the elections to head this body was held. There are 32 member countries which are part of this organization, and the Indian representative from the Postal Services of India got elected with support from almost all the other member countries. So that's how India took over the leadership of Asian Pacific Postal Union. Now, what does it do essentially? See, this organization, it's an intergovernmental organization. It basically promotes cooperation in the domain of postal services to maintain common standards, to improve postal services, to ensure that there is better communication between the countries. This organization, it's part of the Universal Postal Union, which is a UN organization. That's where the topic becomes even more important. UPSC might not just ask about this development where India took over the leadership of Asian Pacific Postal Union. It might ask about Universal Postal Union as well, which is a UN agency. So Asian Pacific Postal Union, it is a restricted union which is part of the Universal Postal Union, which is a global organization. The UPU, right? Universal Postal Union, it's a specialized agency of the United Nations that promotes cooperation between member countries to improve postal relations, postal services, and set standards for postal communication. This is what you need to know about this important topic. Now, there's another point that you need to write down. Please make a note of this. The Universal Postal Union was established in the year 1874, which makes it the second oldest international organization in the world. It's another important fact. See, some of these topics from IR can be very factual. It's just about revising them, remembering them. I think that's where the crash course will help you, right? Because we are picking all these important topics which you might have forgotten. You might have read, but you might have forgotten. So, the Universal Postal Union happens to be the second oldest international organization in the world. Is that clear? It was established in 1874. There are 192 member countries, essentially UN member states, right, can become members of Universal Postal Union, and even non-members can apply. Non-member countries which are not UN member states, even they can apply for membership, like let's say Palestine, for example. Palestine is not a member state of UN, but it can apply for membership, but only condition is it requires the support of 2/3 members of the Universal Postal Union. So there can be a question here as well on the composition of Universal Postal Union. So there are 192 member countries. Any UN member can become a member of the Universal Postal Union. Even non-UN members can apply, but they need the support of 2/3 of the members of the organization. Now, can you tell me which is the oldest international organization in the world? If Universal Postal Union is the second oldest, which is considered as the oldest international organization in the world? Let's see how many of you know this. Which is the oldest international organization? ILO, no. Many students are saying International Labour Organization. No, it's incorrect. Anirudh Sharma has given the right answer. Anirudh Sharma is the only student along with Gaurav Kumar who has given the right answer. Very good. It is ITU, the International Telegraph Union. It was established few years before this in 1865. Is that clear? So that's another interesting fact. Now let's move on to the next question, question number 5. Please read the question. It's very straightforward. Try to give me the right answer and then we'll discuss this topic. It's a very important topic. Wassenaar Arrangement is a multilateral export control regime that deals with what? Does it regulate trade in endangered species? Does it prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons? Does it control the export of dual-use goods and technologies? Does it prevent the spread of chemical and biological weapons? Take a few seconds. It's a very simple question, but the topic is very important. There are many related issues that I'm going to discuss. Let's see how many of you can answer this question. All right, around 39% of the students have given the right answer. The correct answer is option C. Wassenaar arrangement, which is a multilateral export control regime, it regulates the export of conventional weapons and dual-use technologies or dual-use items. I'll explain this, don't worry. I'll explain everything about Wassenaar arrangement, and there are other related export control regimes as well. We will discuss that. But first, let's understand the context. You should know why Wassenaar arrangement was in news, why the topic could be important for the upcoming prelims. See, last year, in 2023, India held the chairmanship of Wassenaar arrangement. Is that clear? In December 2022, India was elected to chair the Wassenaar arrangement, and India's term began from 1st January 2023, and we held the term for the entire year. So throughout the last year, India was heading Wassenaar arrangement. It's one of the most important export control regimes, and since India was holding the chair position, the topic will be very important. Even the other related export control regimes can become very important. Now, coming back to the question, the other three options that were given, right, even they refer to some convention or some export control regime. The first one, which regulates international trade in endangered species, right, it's actually referring to the CITES Convention, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, right, which regulates the trade of certain endangered species and their products, basically to protect certain endangered species. The second option, which is referring to preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons, it's a reference to a very important arms control organization or export control regime called Nuclear Suppliers Group, NSG. The fourth one, that is option D, which refers to preventing the spread of chemical biological weapons, it's referring to Australia Group, which is another important export control regime. So let's quickly understand what are these export control regimes. There are four important export control regimes when it comes to WMDs or weapons of mass destruction. So let's understand every important detail about these export control regimes. First, we have the Nuclear Suppliers Group or NSG. We have Australia Group. We have MTCR, Missile Technology Control Regime, and Wassenaar Arrangement. These are the four export control regimes that we have. See, there are few WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, like nuclear weapons, for example, or biological weapons, chemical weapons. They can cause enormous damage. So the global community was concerned about the spread of these weapons and the technologies related to them. Essentially, they were concerned about the proliferation or the spread of these weapons and related technologies. So to ensure that these sensitive technologies don't fall into the wrong hands and ensure that it doesn't trigger an arms race, these export control regimes were set up. The first was NSG, Nuclear Suppliers Group, which was established in the year 1975. Please write this down. Established in 1975 as a direct response to India's nuclear tests. In 1974, under Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, India carried out its first nuclear test at Pokhran, called Operation Smiling Buddha. So essentially, India had violated a very important treaty, that is the Non-Proliferation Treaty. India violated the Non-Proliferation Treaty. We said we will never sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty because it was discriminatory. Under Non-Proliferation Treaty, only the 5 permanent members of UN Security Council, they were recognized as the official nuclear weapon states. They could retain their nuclear weapons. That is US, UK, France, Soviet Union and China. These countries had already developed and tested their nuclear weapons by 1965, before Non-Proliferation Treaty was brought out. the NPT. It was brought out in 1968 for signature and it came into force from 1970. So if any other country signs the NPT, it's as good as giving up the right to develop nuclear weapons. Apart from the P5, which already possessed nuclear weapons by the time NPT was introduced, every other country which signs NPT, they are committing that we will never develop nuclear weapons. Now, this was unacceptable for India. It was discriminatory because P5 countries could hold on to their nuclear weapons, but countries like India could never develop them. And given the fact that China was an imminent threat, we had even fought a war in 1962, and China by then had already tested its nuclear weapons. India saw this as a necessity, a strategic necessity to develop its own nuclear weapons program. So Prime Minister Indira Gandhi clearly refused to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and we tested our first nuclear weapons in 1974. This was seen as a violation of Non-Proliferation Treaty. Now the global community got together to prevent the further spread of nuclear weapons, mainly to restrict India's nuclear weapons program, to ensure India doesn't access nuclear material, nuclear technologies easily, and to make it difficult for other countries as well to ever think of developing a nuclear weapon. That is where NSG was born. In 1975, the Nuclear Suppliers Group was established. It has 48 member countries today. There are 48 member countries. They came together and they restricted the export, the sale of nuclear materials and nuclear technology. Only the member countries can trade with these nuclear materials and nuclear technologies. If they have to export it to a non-NSG member, they need to get the approval, the permission of the NSG. So here decisions are made by consensus. All the countries have equal voting rights. And it became one of the most important export control regimes. And obviously, India is not a member of NSG. Initially, India was kept out of NSG because to join NSG, there was a precondition. The precondition is that you should sign NPT. Only those countries which sign Non-Proliferation Treaty can apply for NSG membership. But India had outright rejected the Non-Proliferation Treaty, stating we will never sign NPT no matter what. Even Pakistan, Israel, these are three countries which have willingly chosen not to sign Non-Proliferation Treaty. So India, until recently, couldn't aspire for a membership for Nuclear Suppliers Group. But in the last 2 decades, things have started changing. Ever since India struck the nuclear deal with the US in 2004-2005, the US gave recognition to India's nuclear program and it granted the NSG exemption for India. The US promised to India that it will help India become a member of all the export control regimes, including the NSG. Because India wants to be part of the nuclear trade. We want to access nuclear material like uranium and nuclear technologies that are available to power our civilian sector, especially our nuclear power plants. So India has been very eager to join the NSG and US started backing India. Many countries came around and over the last 20 years, most countries are supporting India's entry into Nuclear Suppliers Group. But however, we still haven't become a member of NSG. It's all thanks to our neighbor China. China has blocked India's membership because China doesn't want India to be a part of this elite club. China doesn't want global recognition to be given to India's nuclear program, which has been very clean. There has been no case of nuclear proliferation or leakage of nuclear secrets or nuclear material from India. This clean track record of India's nuclear program is something that's recognized by the global community. But China doesn't want our nuclear program to be put on par with, let's say, China's nuclear program. And China is trying to bring Pakistan into the angle, urging Pakistan to be given the same treatment as India. So, by making such unreasonable arguments, China has blocked India's membership to NSG. Is that clear? So NSG is very, very important for our exams. India is trying from 20 plus years to join the group. We have the support of every other country, even Japan, even South American countries, New Zealand, right, which traditionally were opposed to India's membership. They are all supporting India today, but due to China's block, we are not able to join the NSG because decisions here are taken by consensus. You need the support of all the 48 members. So it basically regulates the export of nuclear material and nuclear technology. Next, Australia Group, established in the year 1985 to regulate the trade of any material or technology through which chemical weapons and biological weapons can be built, which is a WMD, or a weapon of mass destruction. Australia took the initiative to establish such an export control group. That's why it's called Australia Group. Is that clear? Today, there are 43 countries that are members of Australia Group, and India is also one of them. India recently gained membership of Australia Group in 2018. Because of the support we got from US, the US gave complete backing to India after the nuclear deal, and it stated that the US will ensure that India becomes a member of all the 4 export control regimes. So thanks to the American help, plus India's own diplomatic push, and the support we have got from other member countries, we have become members of the other 3 export control regimes. We have become member of MTCR, Wassenaar arrangement as well. But NSG eludes India. We haven't been able to enter NSG because of China's blockade. Next, MTCR, Missile Technology Control Regime, proposed in 1985, but it was actually established in 1987 by the G7 countries. The G7 group of industrialized nations, they proposed the idea of a MTCR group that can control the movement or spread of missile-related technologies. Is that clear? It was established in 1987, and essentially it regulates the export of any technology related to missiles, rockets, and even unmanned aerial vehicles, if they can travel a range of more than 300 kilometers, and if they can deliver a payload of more than 500 kilograms. So such weapons technologies are prohibited from exports. They are regulated. Only member countries can trade, and if they are selling it to some other country which is not a MTCR member, they need to get explicit permissions and approvals. That is the reason for why India's BrahMos, the range of BrahMos was kept limited at 290 kilometers. Because BrahMos was a joint project between India and Russia. India was not a member of MTCR until recently. So if the range of BrahMos was more than 300 kilometers, Russia would be in breach of MTCR. It would have helped a non-MTCR country like India to procure an advanced cruise missile with a range of more than 300 kilometers that can deliver a payload of more than 500 kilograms. That's why the Indian version of BrahMos, the range, was kept limited to 290 kilometers, just under 300 kilometers. But in 2016, India became a member. Please write down this point. In 2016, India gained membership to MTCR. So that is why right now India is working on the next generation of BrahMos, where the range is being extended. According to media reports, the range of BrahMos has already been extended to around 800 to 1,000 kilometers. It's possible because now India is a member of MTCR. We no longer have these restrictions. Then finally, the last one, which was asked in the question, Wassenaar arrangement. Wassenaar is a place in Netherlands. It's located near the city of Hague, and here an arrangement was created, the Wassenaar arrangement. It essentially regulates the export of conventional weapons, conventional arms that are produced using dual-use technologies. When I say dual-use technology, it essentially means any technology which has a civilian application and a military application. The same civilian technology can be used for military technology to make weapons. For example, semiconductors, certain types of semiconductor technologies, battery technology, or metallurgical processes. They have civilian industrial applications. The same technology, if used in defense, aerospace, etc., can be used to produce WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, which are conventional weapons. So to ensure that such sensitive technologies doesn't fall into the wrong hands, Wassenaar arrangement was created. Is that clear? So in Wassenaar arrangement, there are 42 countries, and India became the 42nd member in 2017. In 2017, we gained membership to Wassenaar arrangement. In MTCR, there are 35 member countries. The reason why I am insisting on these facts is because UPSC might ask a factual question. Given the importance of the topic, given that India is still pursuing membership to NSG, you can expect a question. Recently, we have gained membership. In 2016, we got membership to MTCR. 2017, we entered Wassenaar arrangement. 2018, we became a member of the Australia group. Is that clear? So in Wassenaar arrangement, there is a list of items and technologies. Those technologies are prohibited for international trade. Only the member countries can export them, and if they're exporting it to a non-member country, they have to inform the other members, take permissions as well, so that it prevents the spread of sensitive dual-use technologies which have both civilian and military applications. So because of India's entry to Wassenaar arrangement, Australia group, we can easily access readily available civilian and industrial technologies as well. Previously, there was a technological sanction on India. We couldn't access some advanced technologies readily available in the market because we weren't members of Australia group and Wassenaar arrangement. So now that India has entered these elite export control regimes, we can access advanced civilian technology as well, which can bring economic benefits, industrial benefits to India. Is that clear? So it is a big topic, a very important topic. UPSC hasn't asked too many questions from this area. So I do expect a major question to be asked from here. Now let's look at question number 6. It's a match the following type of question. Right? This is another format which is very common in IR questions. So let's see how many of you can answer this. On the left, you have a set of Indian missions that were conducted abroad recently. On the right, it's been matched with countries which were in crisis where these missions might have been carried out by India. Now you need to check which of them are correctly matched. Take a few seconds. It's a very simple question. But again, it depends on whether you remember the topic, whether you have read about these developments. Operation Dost has been matched with Ukraine. Operation Kaveri matched with Sudan. Operation Ajay matched with Israel. Operation Indravati matched with Afghanistan. How many of them are correctly matched? Let's see how many of you can answer this. All of you, please try and give the right answer. Most of them are saying B. Very good. B indeed is the correct answer. Only 2 of the given pairs are correctly matched. The first one is an incorrect match. Operation Dost was not in Ukraine. Operation Dost was in Turkey and Syria when they were hit by a devastating earthquake last year. India provided disaster management assistance. Operation Kaveri was in Sudan. That's absolutely correct. Operation Ajay was in Israel. Operation Indravati was not in Afghanistan. This is incorrect. Operation Indravati was in Haiti, in the Caribbean nation of Haiti. So 2 and 3 are correctly matched. The correct answer is only 2. That is option B. Now let's quickly talk about these missions that India carried out abroad last year. There were many crisis situations that India dealt with, including the massive earthquake in Turkey and Syria. In the Anatolia region, there was a devastating earthquake where entire cities were flattened, hundreds of people were killed, and India rushed disaster management assistance. What we call as HADR support was given by India. HADR stands for Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Relief. So providing such disaster management assistance is part of India's friendly relations with other countries. It's a gesture by India, it's a soft power projection by India. And in a way, you project your hard power as well when you conduct such operations, because you are showing your military capabilities as well when you assist other countries or when you rescue your citizens from a conflict zone. So Operation Dost provided medical aid, disaster management support. Indian Army, Indian Air Force were involved. Our advanced transport aircraft like the C-17 Globemasters and the C-130J Super Hercules, which we have procured from the US. They were used for the heavy airlift operation. We delivered several hundred tons of relief material, from medical aid to emergency supplies, and even medical teams from Indian Army were dispatched to provide first aid to the injured people in Turkey and Syria. Next, in Sudan, we faced another major crisis last year. Sudan descended into a civil war. A civil war broke out between the Sudanese army and a paramilitary force called the RSF. So this war, which was basically a struggle for power, it triggered complete chaos in the country and thousands of Indians were trapped, especially members of Abyei tribe from Karnataka. The members of Abyei tribe, right, they're a scheduled tribe in Karnataka. Their traditional occupation was to hunt birds, right? In Kannada, Hakki means bird. But their traditional occupation was compromised because of our environmental laws, which prohibited the hunting of birds. So members of Abyei tribe, they started specializing in herbal medicine. They used their indigenous traditional knowledge to take the local medicinal herbs and to produce traditional medicine out of it. This gained a lot of popularity around the world. So members of the tribe, they move around countries, especially in Africa, selling the herbal medicine, which is very popular in these countries. So several thousand members of Abyei tribe and other Indians who work in Sudan were caught in the conflict. So India immediately launched a rescue mission, evacuation mission called Operation Kaveri. Indian military assets were dispatched. Indian naval vessels, which were in the nearby region, right, they were dispatched to Port Sudan. Please mark the location. You can get a map-based question as well. This is where Port Sudan is located. It faces the Red Sea. Fortunately for India, near Suez Canal, you have Port Said in Egypt. Right? Here a naval vessel was already located. Remember, because of the close India-Egypt defense relations, Indian naval ships were stationed here. They were taking part in a naval exercise with Egyptian Navy. So immediately these ships were diverted to Port Sudan. Then in Oman as well, there were few Indian naval ships who were working with Omani Navy in the Duqm port. In the Duqm port of Oman, right, Indian Navy has gained access to the Duqm port. So here as well, few Indian naval vessels were stationed. So quickly we could dispatch them to the Red Sea to Port Sudan. From here, Indians were brought to Jeddah, which is in Saudi Arabia. We used the good relations we have with Saudi Arabia, UAE, rescued all the Indians, brought them here. Indian Air Force jets were also used. The C-17 and C-130J transport aircraft were also used. And India successfully evacuated all the Indian nationals. It was one of the most daring military missions because we had very little support on the ground in Sudan. So in between a conflict situation, to carry out such a high-risk evacuation, it requires tremendous logistical capabilities, requires a lot of planning, requires advanced assets, military assets like these aircrafts and naval vessels which India has in its possession. Right? So India has in a way developed expertise in such high-risk evacuation missions. We have been doing it from 1990s. It's nothing new to India. Right? During the Gulf War, then during the Lebanon War, Israel-Lebanon War in 2006, then when Libya descended into a civil war in 2011, right? And when Yemen descended into a civil war in 2014, right? India has been doing it quite consistently. So when the Gaza war broke out, after Hamas carried out this brutal attack against Israel and Israel retaliated against Hamas in Gaza, several Indians were trapped in Israel. So India carried out a rescue mission called Operation Ajay. Then recently in Haiti, which is a Caribbean nation, several Indians were trapped because the country has descended into complete violence. From several years, Haiti is going through a major crisis. Governance has collapsed. Many years ago, it was hit by a devastating earthquake. It's one of the poorest countries today in the Caribbean region. And there has been large-scale gang-related violence. Criminal gangs have flourished because of poor security, poor governance, poor law and order. So large-scale violent incidents broke out recently in Haiti and many Indians were trapped. You might be wondering how come Indians are present in such faraway countries. It's because in the Caribbean, we have a very strong diaspora community. During the British rule, thousands of Indian families were transported to the Caribbean islands to work as part of the indentured labor system, to work in the sugar plantations of the Caribbean region. So across Jamaica, Barbados, St. Kitts and Nevis, which are all part of West Indies, right? You have a very strong Indian community. So in Haiti as well, there were many Indians who were trapped, and we launched Operation Indravati to evacuate and rescue these Indian nationals. The other recent missions, right, in Ukraine, for example, was Operation Ganga, when the Russia-Ukraine war broke out a couple of years ago. We rescued more than 20,000 Indian students. And when Taliban took over Afghanistan in 2021, India carried out Operation Devi Shakti, where we rescued Indian officials, Indian nationals, and even Afghan nationals who were friendly towards India. They were all rescued and evacuated under Operation Devi Shakti. So having basic knowledge about these developments can be very important for the exam. Now let's look at question number 7. It's a very straightforward question. It's either you know it or you don't know it. I feel it's a very important topic because there was a recent development related to this. Let's see how many of you can answer this. The poll will be launched very soon. I want all of you to attempt this particular question. Bali Fintech agenda was brought out by WTO, IMF and World Bank, World Economic Forum, or UNESCO. Have you heard of Bali Fintech agenda? It's an old topic slightly, but very important. And related to Bali Fintech agenda, there was something in news last year. That is why I have chosen this topic. Let's see how many of you can answer this. 40% are saying option B. Very good. Option B indeed is the correct answer. Bali Fintech agenda was brought out by both the IMF and World Bank. So let's understand the context and then I'll explain what the topic is all about. See, last year, the IMF brought out an action plan to regulate crypto assets. As you know, cryptocurrencies and crypto assets have become very popular, right? But the concern with cryptocurrencies is that it could be easily misused. It can be misused for money laundering, terrorist financing. It could become an avenue for channeling black money, to evade taxes, to engage in criminal activities. So most governments, central banks, and even international financial institutions, they have been concerned about crypto assets. So last year, the IMF brought out a crypto asset action plan. A 9-point crypto asset action plan was brought out. The IMF recommended that all countries, they should not recognize cryptocurrencies as legal tender. Now, for example, if you look at a country called Ecuador, right? Ecuador became the first country to treat cryptocurrencies, especially Bitcoin, as legal tender. If you go to Ecuador, for example, you can trade with Bitcoins. You can carry out transactions with Bitcoins. There are ATMs which enable the transactions as well. So Ecuador has given the legal tender status to cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. So IMF did not want this trend to spread, given the concerns surrounding the misuse of cryptocurrencies. So it has brought out a 9-point action plan urging the countries to not recognize cryptocurrencies as legal tender or as official currency. Under the 9-point action plan, IMF is asking all the countries to closely monitor the transactions, tax the transactions accordingly, and ensure that they keep an eye on money laundering and terrorist financing to ensure that there is no misuse of cryptocurrencies. IMF is also calling for international cooperation between the countries to tackle any crypto crimes, crypto frauds which are committed. So this is what the 9-point crypto asset action plan dealt with. It was brought out by the IMF. Now, this action plan brought out by the IMF, it is based on Bali Fintech agenda, which was introduced few years ago in 2018 by both IMF and World Bank. That's why the correct answer is IMF and World Bank. Bali Fintech agenda, introduced in 2018, it laid the framework for regulating the fintech sector, which was gaining a lot of popularity, right? Just like you have edtech, you also have another emerging sector, which is fintech, financial technology. All your broking apps, stock exchange, mutual fund related apps, your payment wallets, right? All the digital payment gateways that we use, they're all part of the fintech ecosystem. So there are many opportunities in the fintech world. It's a very thriving potential that exists. There's a huge market. It can create a massive market capitalization. It can create jobs. At the same time, if fintech apps are misused, if fintech companies have the wrong motivation, right? If they have a wrong intention, they can easily commit financial frauds through digital transactions. So to prevent that from happening, the Bali Fintech agenda was adopted by IMF and World Bank in 2018. Please make a note of this. Even India's RBI and Ministry of Finance, they base their policies and decisions regarding the fintech industry by drawing relevance from the Bali Fintech agenda of 2018. So IMF and World Bank created a framework, a global framework to regulate the fintech industry. They don't want to stifle innovation and genuine competition. They want the sector to thrive because there are many opportunities here, many benefits. But at the same time, there are concerns, there are risks which needs to be tackled through efficient regulation. So with that focus in mind, Bali Fintech agenda was adopted, and the crypto regulation plan, the asset action plan brought out by IMF, is based on this. So that is why both the topics are important. Just know which institution, which international organization took up this initiative. Let's move on to question number 8. Please read the question carefully. Consider the following statements. It's related to the IMO, International Maritime Organization, which was also in the news. So please go through the statements and give me the right answer. I'll give you a few seconds. Read the statements carefully. And I also see that in the comments, a lot of students are talking to each other. They're just spamming the comments. They're disturbing other students. Other students are complaining as well. So please don't engage in this behavior. It will force us to stop the live chat option, right? Please keep it only for raising your doubts, to discuss something genuine, and to answer the question by using the poll option. Let's keep it interactive. Let's keep the discussion civil. Let's keep it useful and productive. Look at the first statement. IMO is a specialized agency of UN. It has adopted a new mandatory international code of safety for ships carrying industrial personnel. The code will enter into force on July 1st, 2024. How many of the statements are correct? 49% of the students have said all 3 statements are correct. Very good. That is indeed the right answer. Statement 1 is absolutely right. IMO is a specialized agency of the UN. IMO has adopted a new international code of safety for ships carrying industrial personnel. I'll explain this point. It's very, very important. The code is coming into force from 1st July 2024. That is why the topic is very relevant. Is that clear? It has an impact on India as well. So all 3 statements are correct. Option C becomes the correct answer. So first, let's talk about IMO quickly. Let's get the basic facts right. And then I'll explain about this new safety code which is being enforced by the IMO. International Maritime Organization. It is a specialized agency of the UN that was established in 1948. Initially, it was known by a different name. Later, it became a specialized agency in 1959, and the current name was given to it in 1982. Though these facts may not be relevant, it's at least good to know the context. It will help you in remembering these factual topics. Sometimes if you try to remember this as a story, it becomes easier to recollect. Right? If you know the context, if you know the background, it helps in remembering the relevant facts. That's where even these unnecessary facts might play a role. Now, please understand that IMO, it sets the global safety standards for shipping and maritime activities. It's a global standard setting authority. So be it the shipping industry, ensuring the safety of ships at sea, or even the safety of the personnel, the crew which are manning the ships, the commercial ships, and the cruise ships as well, right? They're all regulated under the international standards set by the IMO. Even environmental pollution, marine pollution caused by international shipping is dealt with by IMO. So it's a very important topic. UPSC might ask you a question here. Which UN organization deals with environmental pollution caused by international shipping? Answer is IMO again. So please remember, it has 3 major tasks. 1, it brings out international standards for safety of ships and safety of the crew. Point number 2, it ensures the security of the maritime trading routes, the shipping routes. And 3rd, it also tackles environmental pollution caused to marine ecosystems by international shipping. So it sets these global standards to ensure the safety, security, and to protect the marine ecosystems from the harmful effects of international shipping. I hope you know that Most of the global trade is carried out through the sea route. Large part of today's globalized economy depends on international shipping, right? So it's very important to regulate the sector, the industry, to deal with all the issues and concerns and to set these global standards. So there are 176 member states and 3 associate members to the IMO, and India is one of them. Please write this down. India is a member of International Maritime Organization. It's headquartered in London. And it consists of an assembly, a council, and 5 main committees. This is the structure, the composition of IMO. There is an assembly, which is the highest decision-making body, where the governments are represented. There is an executive council, which acts as the executive organ that implements the decisions of the assembly. And there are specialized committees and subcommittees that provide technical opinions and inputs based on which the assembly takes the decisions and the council implements those decisions. Is that clear? So it's a 3-tiered body. There is an assembly at the top, which is the most powerful and the highest decision-making body of the IMO. Next, there is a council, an executive council, which implements those decisions. And finally, you have committees and subcommittees that bring the specialized technical skills. Now, let's understand why the topic was in news. There were 2 reasons why IMO was in news, and I feel the topic is very important because of this reason. One, India got re-elected to the Executive Council of IMO. Please write this down. Last year, India has got re-elected to the Executive Council, which implements the decisions of the IMO. So essentially, it gives India a leadership position. And the other important development is about the safety code, the new code of safety for ships that are carrying industrial personnel. So who are these industrial personnel who are carried by ships? Have you ever seen oil rigs, offshore oil rigs located in the seas, in the oceans? Have you seen offshore windmills located in the seas and the oceans? How did they come up? Obviously, industrial personnel were sent, right? They set up the equipment, they maintain them, they service them regularly. It's a very hard and difficult life for the personnel who are serving these infrastructure projects. Even India has a lot of focus on offshore windmill projects, because going forward, countries will focus on renewable energy, clean renewable energy, to decarbonize their economies. So offshore windmills are very popular of late. There are many offshore oil rigs and other industrial facilities located. So to maintain them, to operate them, to service them, frequently industrial crew is dispatched through ships. They are sent over there and they are brought back. Many times, these personnel who work at these facilities, they spend a lot of time on ships. Many times they don't come back to the shore, but the ship docks here for several weeks, and the crew are taken to different facilities one by one in smaller boats. So they end up spending a good 1 or 2 months right on the ship by working at these facilities. That becomes their workplace. This is where industrial personnel have faced many risks to their safety and well-being. Many shipping companies are not taking care of their employees, the crew members. They're not giving them right facilities, the right pay, the right insurance and social security. Such ships are vulnerable for attacks by pirates or by criminals. Natural disasters could pose a major threat to such industrial personnel. That is why it's important to implement a safety code for these industrial personnel who are transported by ships. This is the new code, a new global standard that IMO is bringing out. It will take effect from 1st July 2024. So in another 2.5 months, all countries will be obligated to implement the standards, including India. Now, this is very important for India because India also has many plans for offshore windmill projects and other offshore industrial facilities. So even we will be forced to implement the global standards, which will help in protecting the industrial personnel who are transported by ships. Is that clear? So that is why the topic was important. Now let's take up one last question for today, and the rest of the topics we can resume them tomorrow. Let's look at this question, a match the following type of question. A list of important military exercises that were in news last year involving India, matched with the participating country. Now let me know how many of them are correctly matched. Take 30 seconds. It's a straightforward question. Exercise Tarkash, is it between India and US? Dharma Guardian, is it between India and Nepal? Dustlik, is it between India and Kazakhstan? Ekuverin, is it between India and Maldives? Let's see how many of you can answer this right. The poll is live. Please go ahead and try to give the right answer. Many students are giving option B as the right answer. Let's check. Exercise Tarkash is very, very important for the upcoming prelims because it was a very unique military exercise between India and US. For the first time, Special Forces of India and US. From India, it was the NSG, the National Security Guards, the Black Cat Commandos, along with US Special Op Teams, US Special Forces. They conducted a unique exercise focusing on CBRN threat. CBRN stands for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. During war, right? Let's say chemical weapons are used or biological weapons are used. Or let's say there is a radiological incident. There is a radioactive leakage during a conflict. Maybe one country hit the nuclear plant of another country. Or let's say nuclear weapons were actually used. So that creates a CBRN warfare environment. Such environments are contaminated. It would have caused enormous damage to people. Thousands of people would have been killed. Plus the whole site, the whole area would be contaminated. Right? Imagine a deadly pathogen, a weaponized pathogen has been released, a biological agent. Right? It could be triggering a pandemic. Or let's say a dirty nuclear bomb has been used, maybe by terrorists as well. Right? So such warfare environments are called CBRN environments. It requires special skills and special equipment to handle them. So in armed forces, they will have specialized teams that handle CBRN sites. So this has been the focus under Operation or Exercise Tarkash, which is a joint exercise conducted for the first time last year between Indian Special Forces and US Special Forces. That's why I feel the topic is very important. It's the first time ever that India's NSG has conducted such an exercise with US Special Forces focused on the CBRN threat. Second one, Dharma Guardian. It's incorrect because it's between India and Japan. It's not between India and Nepal. Dharma Guardian is an army exercise between Indian Army and the self-defense force of the Japanese armed forces. The focus is mainly counter-terrorism, and it includes part of maritime operations as well with the naval forces. So Dharma Guardian is primarily army-led exercise between India and Japan. Next, exercise Dustlik. It's between India and Uzbekistan. India, Uzbekistan are key partners when it comes to security issues in Central Asia and South Asia. So India, Uzbekistan have a joint military exercise called Dustlik, and the focus is again counter-terrorism. It's between Indian Army and the Uzbek Army. Then Ekuverin is an army exercise between Indian Army and the Army of Maldives, the National Defense Forces of Maldives. I feel this is important because of the tensions in India-Maldives relations. Maldives has asked India to remove all the troops stationed in the country. Right? India had few troops from Navy and Air Force who were operating military equipment in Maldives. And Maldives has forced India to withdraw them, and we are in the process of completing the withdrawal. So despite that, a joint military exercise was held last year, that is Ekuverin. So that's why I feel Tarkash and Ekuverin especially can be very important. So coming back to the question, 1 and 4 are correctly matched, 2 and 3 are incorrectly matched. What's the right answer? Option B. Only 2 of the given pairs are correctly matched. So I think on this note, we can end today's session. We're already running out of time. Don't worry, tomorrow, day after, and the next day. We still have 3 days to go for international relations, and I promise to cover at least 60-65 topics through these MCQ-based discussions. So today itself, we have covered 9 questions and many subtopics as well, which brings it up to around 15 plus topics today. Do let me know what you think. I hope you guys liked the session. Let me see if I can take a couple of questions as well. Any specific doubt, Be very specific to the questions we have discussed. Any questions, please let me know. Please disable the live chat. As I told you, if people don't behave, if they are not civil, if they keep spamming the chat box, we will consider that. So please make use of the facility. Let's use this in a good way. Let's use this for interaction between the faculty and the students. And also, it's a great opportunity for you to provide the answers and be engaged, be involved in the class. So don't spam the chat box. Is India a member of World Bank? Yes, India is a member of the World Bank. Nihalni is asking, is Japan a member of Nuclear Suppliers Group? Yes, Japan is a member of Nuclear Suppliers Group. Japan is very strongly committed to the Non-Proliferation Treaty as well. Sir, where should I get the PPT? Just go to the video description. There is a link. Click on the link. Just follow the path and you will be able to download the PPT. So tell me from what time I should read current affairs. Ideally, the last 12 to 18 months will be very important. Next, a student is asking, South Korea is part of global South? No, South Korea is seen as an industrialized economy. It's seen as part of global North. How to join Australia group? How to become a member? Niranjan Nayak is asking. Interested countries can apply, but admission of a new member to Australia group, right? It's left to all the members. All the members have to agree to admit a new member country. So all countries will agree to admit a new member only if they have a clean track record. That is, only if they're committed to the principle of non-proliferation. They shouldn't have contributed to the leakage or spread of weapons technology and such harmful weapons. They should not have played a role in the leakage of such secrets or such sensitive equipment and technologies. That is a basic condition. So all the member countries of Australia group will decide whether they will accept a new member or not. Australia is part of Global South? No. Australia is a developed country. It's seen as part of Global North. It's located to the north of the Brandt line, if you go back and look at the map. Sir, annotated PPT is not available. That is for a specific reason. We want you to watch the session, understand the explanation, right? So please use the PPT for the questions, watch the session for the entire explanation and the answers. All right. So guys, these were the questions. There is one final poll for you. Did you find the session interesting? Please let us know. After the session ends, do comment below if you benefited from the session, and do join me again tomorrow at 7:30. We are going to discuss many more topics. Please attend all the classes till 31st May. We also have some interesting sessions in between. In between, we will be conducting few marathon sessions to help you revise all the important static topics as well. Our goal is to make this platform a one-stop destination for UPSC Civil Services aspirants. I hope we are doing justice to the promise we have made, and if you agree with that, do let us know in the comments. Do press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it for today. Let's meet tomorrow. Thanks for watching.